What happens when the very people who once handed you the global spotlight suddenly slam the door in your face? That's the question haunting Meghan Markle and Prince Harry today. Not behind closed palace gates, but under the unforgiving gaze of a world that's tired of the drama and no longer picking up their calls. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because this story, it doesn't start with a royal tour or even an awkward press release. It starts with a ringtone, one that went unanswered, a silent phone, a desperate request, and a name, Oprah Winfrey. Yes, that Oprah. The woman who once handed the Sussexes the biggest media microphone of their post-royal lives is now shutting the curtains tight. No callbacks, no security hookups, no private jets, just silence. But why? What really happened behind the scenes? And what does this have to do with Australia? And a 2026 tour that's already making Prince William furious? Let's rewind. Because to understand just how messy this is getting, you need to see the entire chessboard. At first glance, it sounds like a glamorous opportunity. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are reportedly planning a high-profile trip to Australia in 2026. A soft power splash. A triumphant return to the continent where they once basked in royal approval during their wildly successful 2018 tour. But this time, there's no palace backing, no taxpayer-funded security, no royal staff smoothing things over. This time, they're on their own. And according to insiders, they've been calling in every favor, pulling every string, even begging billionaire friends for help covering costs they used to take for granted, including private jets, elite security escorts, and yes, Oprah Winfrey's blessing. But here's the twist. That help? It never came. And Oprah, someone they once treated as a safe haven, a trusted confidant, even a mentor, has reportedly cut them off entirely. Politely, but firmly. No calls, no funding, no involvement. Which begs the question, what went so wrong between Oprah and the Sussexes? And perhaps more provocatively, if even Oprah is turning away, who's left on their side? Now let's zoom out. Why is this Australia trip such a big deal anyway? To the untrained eye, it might look like a PR tour. A feel-good re-entry into the Commonwealth they once walked away from. But insiders say this is something else entirely. They're calling it the Australia Gambit. A calculated move to recapture lost global influence. A symbolic attempt to reinsert themselves into royal-adjacent life without actually being royals. They want the optics, the headlines, the adulation, but not the accountability, the structure, or the service. And that's precisely what's making Prince William furious. Behind the palace walls, senior aides have described him as deeply concerned and unusually vocal about the Sussexes' intentions. One source went further. He sees it as impersonation, pure and simple. You can't reject the monarchy and then go on tour pretending to be it. But wait, there's more. The real firestorm didn't begin in Buckingham Palace. It started in Hollywood. Because in their scramble to make the Australia trip happen, Harry and Meghan reportedly went back to a very familiar well, one that's already drying up. They approached Oprah, not just for advice, not just for exposure, but for help footing the bill. Security, private transport, PR amplification. Allegedly, they wanted it all and were prepared to promise access in return. The kind of transactional offer that raises eyebrows in every corner of the industry. But Oprah, she didn't bite. In fact, she didn't even reply, not right away. When she finally did, it wasn't with enthusiasm or support. According to two sources close to her circle, the message was clear: I've stepped back. It was a message Meghan reportedly didn't see coming. And neither did Harry. And here's where the story spirals. Because that rejection didn't stay private for long. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs turned into leaks. And soon, other Hollywood elites, the ones Meghan had hoped would rally around her, began backing away too. Quietly, subtly, but unmistakably. So what does this all add up to? A crumbling media empire? A cautionary tale? Or just another chapter in a never-ending saga of missteps and miscalculations? You might think the Australia trip is months, years away. But the damage, it seems, has already begun. Tabloids in Sydney are already mocking the rumored itinerary. Politicians are distancing themselves. Australian citizens are voicing frustration at the idea of paying for a royal-style tour by a couple who gave up the royal gig. Meanwhile, Prince William is reportedly exploring ways to formally distance the crown from any Sussex foreign tour. Some say he's even urging King Charles to issue a rare statement on the matter. And Netflix? Well, let's just say their patience with the Sussexes' content pipeline is wearing thin. So where does this leave Harry and Meghan? Alone, unfunded, and increasingly isolated, not just from the monarchy, but from the celebrity machine they once believed would replace it. The Australia trip was supposed to be their reset. Instead, it may become their reckoning. And the first sign was that unanswered phone call to Oprah. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Because what started as a cold shoulder from Oprah quietly snowballed into a full-blown chain reaction. Not just social rejection, not just ignored calls, but something far deeper, a shift in how the world, and more importantly, how Hollywood, now views the once untouchable Sussex brand. Let's rewind just a bit. After that first ignored call, Meghan didn't give up. Not right away. According to insiders close to her media circle, she attempted a different route. A soft reach out. One of those polite, professionally worded emails. The kind that walks the line between casual request and veiled expectation. She even had her team contact an executive assistant of Oprah's, pitching a reunion initiative that would involve Harry and Meghan returning to the global stage with a cause-driven tour down under. The pitch? That this would be a global healing moment, that it would reframe the narrative, that it would signal unity in a divided world. But behind the curtain, Oprah's camp wasn't sold. In fact, one staffer allegedly flagged the entire idea as a reputational risk. Her response, passed down secondhand, was said to be just 4 words long. "This isn't my lane." To the outside world, that would have looked like a neutral deflection. But to Meghan? To Harry? It reportedly landed like a slap in the face. Oprah was their lane. Or at least, she used to be. And so came the silence. And silence, as we know in Hollywood, isn't just the absence of words. It's a signal, a warning, and worst of all, a green light for others to follow suit. Soon, other names began fading into the background too. Gayle King, once one of Meghan's vocal allies on CBS, suddenly pivoted to more neutral coverage. Tyler Perry, the man who once housed them when the UK security detail was pulled, now unavailable for calls. Ari Emanuel's agency, cool and cautious. Even Serena Williams, Meghan's long-touted friend, was said to be keeping distance until the dust settles. And the dust, it was just beginning to rise. Because as rumors of Harry and Meghan's desperate attempts to lock in logistics for the Australia trip began to spread, so too did whispers about what they were asking for. Not just support, not just endorsements, but full-blown material requests. Private jet access, a traveling security detail with elite clearance, a PR crisis team embedded on standby, and even, get this, exclusive production rights for a docuseries meant to reframe their journey from pain to purpose. Think about that. They wanted the perks of a royal tour, the Hollywood glitz, the global attention, the security, the coverage, the private luxury, all without the official royal backing, the formal responsibilities, or the actual status. You see the contradiction, don't you? They walked away from the firm in 2020 citing toxicity, overreach, and a need for independence. But now, they wanted to curate a version of that same royal lifestyle, self-funded, self-scripted, and self-serving. And the industry wasn't buying it. One veteran Hollywood publicist put it bluntly, "You don't ghost the crown, burn your bridges, and then expect red carpets to unroll themselves." By now, the cracks weren't just showing, they were widening. And behind palace doors, Prince William was already being briefed. He didn't wait long to react. Reports say that after seeing the leaked pitch documents referencing a semi-formal Commonwealth-style tour, William told his aides that this was a farce. One insider claims he even said, "You can't throw a tantrum about not wanting to serve the crown, then cosplay as crown emissaries halfway across the world." And you know what? He's not entirely wrong. But while the Windsors braced for impact, the Sussexes seemed convinced they could still pull it off. They were betting on emotional memory, on the goodwill left over from their 2018 Australia tour, when Meghan was pregnant with Archie and the media fawned over her every gesture. when thousands lined up in the rain just to catch a glimpse of the couple, when headlines called them the modern face of the monarchy. But 2018 is a long way off now. And public sentiment? It's not static. It shifts, evolves, sometimes flips entirely. So here's the question. Did Meghan and Harry ever truly grasp just how much the narrative had changed? Or were they so trapped in the echo chamber of curated applause, online fan pages, and filtered feedback that they believed they were still the golden couple of the modern royal age? Either way, Australia 2026 was shaping up to be their battleground, and they were preparing accordingly. New team members were brought in. A revised itinerary was drafted. Private security agencies were consulted in Sydney and Melbourne. There was even, allegedly, a pitch to one of Australia's biggest event organizers proposing a joint public engagement and wellness dialogue series, with Meghan at the center as speaker, activist, and transformational figure. But there was one missing piece. A single domino they assumed would never fall. Oprah. They believed she'd join them. If not in person, then in name. A sponsor, a supporter, a trusted validator. Someone to back them. Especially when the Australian public began asking, who's funding this? And why are they here at all? Instead, what they got was silence, followed by rejection, and eventually, a message, not just one declining their offer, but one that signaled something much deeper. The era of automatic support was over. They were no longer the darlings of a disillusioned elite, no longer the fresh-faced underdogs taking on the monarchy. They had become, in the eyes of many, something far more complicated. Performers, strategists, grifters, or worse, opportunists who bit the hand that fed them and came back for seconds. That may sound harsh, but look around. Look at the headlines, the press, the shifting alliances, the strange, uncomfortable silences. It's not just that people are saying no. It's that they're not even bothering to say it to their face. And in the world Harry and Meghan live in, that silence is deafening. But the final twist? The one thing they never anticipated? Was that all of this, the failed asks, the leaked rejections, the growing distance, was just the beginning of the unraveling. Because the moment Oprah walked away, others followed. And some of them, they didn't walk quietly. They started talking. And what they revealed would send shockwaves through the media and through the very heart of the Sussex operation. The block wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with confetti or a tell-off speech. The block was clean, cold, clinical. 1 minute, Meghan's team thought they were still on the invite list of influence. The next, they were staring at digital emptiness where a conversation thread used to live. But this time, it wasn't Buckingham Palace pulling the plug. It was Hollywood royalty. Media royalty. The kind without crowns, but with power. It was Oprah. And when that name becomes the punchline, everyone leans in. So how did it begin? Not with fights, not with flying accusations, but with an expectation mismatch so big, it would make even a Netflix scriptwriter blush. The seeds of this freeze-out were planted long before Australia 2026 entered the group chat of headlines. Years earlier, Harry and Meghan had delivered their most-watched media moment to date. The 2021 interview that rattled the monarchy, stirred public debate, and crowned Oprah as temporary bridgekeeper between the firm and the ex-firm. It was the interview that made neighbors argue over fences, made morning hosts froth at the mouth, made everyone say one sentence, "I can't believe they said that." But inside LA circles, the fallout narrative was slightly different. I can't believe they thought that was enough. Because what the public didn't see was the slow shift after the broadcast cameras switched off. No more long brunches in Montecito circles. No more mutual PR gratitude. No more emotional elbowing into each other's philanthropic spotlight. There was silence. Yes, but calculated silence. Professional silence. The first sign that something was off is always invisible until someone connects the dots later. Think about your own phone. When someone leaves you on read once, you brush it off. Twice, you raise a brow. 10 times, you write an entire 1-hour YouTube outline about it. The optics of friendship had been strong. The mechanics of friendship? Less clear. The Sussexes, at least in rumor form, assumed Oprah would slot into an informal advisory role for their next media chapters. Oprah did what Oprah does, moved on to her own projects, quietly recalibrated her circle, and focused on stories that didn't need constitutional footnotes. But the Sussex camp did what celebrity-adjacent power players often do, interpreted past access as future entitlement. And this is where the mythology of closeness broke open. Insiders. Palace courtier to public chatroom-style insiders say that Meghan's team began reaching out casually at first. It was nothing outrageous at the start. Holiday notes, wellness check messages, invitations to join panel discussions. The modern currency of relevance isn't gold, it's airtime. It's association. It's the ability to share a headline without being the headline. And they wanted it back. But something was different now. Because Oprah wasn't just ignoring the calls. She was avoiding becoming part of the arc. And there's a difference. A big difference. The kind experts lose millions over when they don't spot it in time. The moment they began planning for 2026, the Australia return, the Commonwealth proximity tour with Hollywood amplification, Meghan's camp reportedly shifted from casual outreach to logistical probing. Suddenly, Oprah's people were hearing phrases like coverage partnership, travel facilitation, trusted support alignment, and the most Hollywood sentence ever whispered, security and transport resource consult. Translation? They were asking for stuff. Not story. Not solidarity. Stuff. Free security. Jet access. Favor logistics. The material skeleton of a tour masquerading as emotional reunion. Let's be honest here. Who asks the interviewer who once platformed their constitutional grievances to now bankroll a foreign tour? Someone who believes myth is infrastructure. Someone who believes narrative has a rewards program attached. Someone who believes peak relevance never expires. But the world they live in now is transactional proof-based. Screenshots leak easier than secrets stay hidden. And when Oprah's camp finally shut the door, rumor says by ceasing responses and restricting access through channels, it wasn't retaliation. It was boundary setting. And boundary setting is boring until you're the one losing access. This wasn't palace exile. This was celebrity quarantine. The calm kind. The one where the power player simply says, I don't want to touch this. Because distance is the new diplomacy when a brand becomes unpredictable. And the Sussex brand had become unpredictable. But not in the rebellious, underdog, Diana documentary softlight angle they maintained online. Unpredictable in the, will this embarrass us if it leaks? Angle. From Oprah's perspective, backing any part of this would mean signing up for 2026 coverage optics that could misfire and boomerang internationally. And Oprah built an empire by not letting boomerangs hit her in the face. But here's what's fascinating. Despite the cool-off, Meghan and Harry's team apparently continued prepping like the trip was still coronation approved. The contradiction wasn't just external. It was internal. Staff brought on specifically to project global healing optics clashed with staff hired to negotiate private luxury logistics. One side pitched emotional charity moments. The other negotiated security costs. The story told internally reportedly changed depending on what day of the week it was. And what day was it when the block truly landed? The planning kickoff day. Because even after Oprah stepped back, Meghan's team continued consulting Australian security vendors privately. Harry began rehearsing public walkabout scenarios for optics, and their media arm pitched potential documentary tie-ins with global platforms. That's not villainy. That's delusion of invariance. And the public loves delusion. It's compelling. It's human. It's brittle. The very idea that this was going to be their reset tour while they simultaneously begged for the infrastructure of relevance they once criticized, that irony is jet fuel on its own. No pun intended. But people in 2026 aren't watching for irony. They're watching for implosion. What really made this chapter electric is the belief that the Sussexes misread celebrity support as personal loyalty. And loyalty is the most dangerous assumption in both royal and Hollywood politics. They built a tour plan assuming past proximity guaranteed future facilitation. But do you know what Hollywood and monarchy have in common? When you leave the ecosystem, you no longer inherit the perks. They believed Australia would be happier to host a second-chance monarchy moment without asking who was paying for security. But in democratic Commonwealth nations like Australia, the polls write the blueprint, not curated PR myth-making. So if Oprah stepping back was a small crack, the bigger cracks now spiderweb outward into funding optics, Palace neutrality optics, Netflix partnership optics, and Williams reaction optics, which we will unpack later. But the death blow? It wasn't just Oprah setting a boundary. It was that her boundary made people re-examine all past assumptions. Once the rejection air hit Meghan's inbox, in rumor form, others allegedly began asking, wait, what else are they planning to ask for that we didn't know about? Wait, was that interview relationship actually a friendship or a one-time media arrangement? Wait, do they still expect billionaire sponsorship for royal-style logistics? And when audiences start asking wait 3 times in a row, your retention metrics go up, but your reputation metrics plummet. So here's the emotional beat they never saw coming. Oprah blocking their contact channels wasn't a feud chapter. How do you ask for a private jet, 24/7 elite-level security, and global media coverage for a tour you're not officially authorized to go on, and still expect a yes? Well, if you're Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, you apparently don't just expect a yes. You expect applause, and not just from anyone, but from billionaires, former talk show queens, tech moguls, and political influencers who, according to insiders, were on the receiving end of some of the most surreal requests to come out of Montecito in recent years. Because what began as a simple idea, a return to Australia in 2026 for charity-driven public engagements, quickly mutated into something else entirely. A wish list so fantastical, so tone-deaf, that even hardened Hollywood agents were left blinking in stunned silence. One called it a fever dream dressed up as a rebrand. Let's set the scene. Harry and Meghan, in their post-Netflix, post-Spotify, post-tabloid fatigue era, were looking for a way to reposition themselves. Their popularity had declined in the UK, faltered in the US, and faced deep skepticism across Commonwealth nations. Australia, however, still held nostalgic gold. Back in 2018, it had been their triumphant moment. Thousands lining the streets, Meghan's maternity glow radiating tabloid headlines, koalas, kids, and causes blending into the fairy tale. Now, in 2026, they wanted it back. But here's the catch. You can't have a royal tour if you're no longer royals. So what do? You build one yourself. According to 2 sources who claim to have seen leaked itinerary drafts and email chains, Meghan's team designed a tour outline complete with security protocols that rivaled a G7 summit. Bulletproof SUV convoys, private access to Sydney Opera House back entrances, no on-screen press, facial recognition systems at meet and greets, and at the heart of it all, a luxury Gulfstream jet to ferry them across the continent in style. And the best part? They didn't want to pay for any of it. Not out of pocket. Not through brand partnerships. No. This was something else entirely. They wanted Oprah, or rather, Oprah's Rolodex. According to one well-placed Hollywood consultant, Meghan's team began reaching out to trusted legacy allies, asking for introductions to donors and safety sponsors, a bizarre euphemism that supposedly covered both physical protection and private aviation. One name that reportedly came up more than once. Jeff Bezos. Let that sit with you. The same couple who famously declared independence from royal funding was now privately requesting help sourcing a $50 million sponsorship shell for a non-royal royal tour, all under the banner of impact storytelling and post-colonial healing. If it sounds contradictory, that's because it is. And the contradictions didn't stop there. One moment, the Sussexes were allegedly asking for security teams equivalent to U.S. Secret Service deployment levels. The next, Meghan was reportedly requesting intimate media access for hand-picked documentary crews to capture their unfiltered human connection with the Australian public. Think about that for a second. Hyper-controlled security barriers, paired with vulnerability-themed docuseries moments. Private jets, paired with climate justice messaging. Government-level privacy, paired with camera-ready emotional arcs. It's like watching a movie that doesn't realize it's parodying itself. But perhaps the most telling piece of the ask came down to the tone in which it was made. Insiders claim Meghan's reps framed the requests as if they were doing the donors a favor. We're inviting you into a legacy moment. This isn't just a tour. It's a chance to align with the future of global empathy. One media executive said it felt like being offered the privilege of footing someone else's fantasy in exchange for a social media shout-out and a back seat on the red carpet. And when Oprah's team declined to participate, Meghan reportedly doubled down, not by scaling back expectations, but by expanding the outreach list. Tech billionaires, philanthropic arms of Fortune 500 companies. Even a few wellness retreats with private airstrips were contacted. Everyone got the pitch, and most ignored it. Because here's the truth. In the world of global influence, there's nothing more radioactive than entitlement disguised as empowerment. And Australia? Australia smelled it from a mile away. Once local journalists got wind of the Sussexes' behind-the-scenes requests, it didn't take long for the tone to shift. News anchors went from cautious curiosity to outright mockery. One Channel 9 personality sarcastically referred to the rumored security package as more than what our Prime Minister gets. An editor at The Australian ran a blistering opinion piece. The Sussexes want the crown without the crown, the jet without the job, the security without the sovereignty. And the online commentary? Brutal. Will we be paying for this? Are they serious? Thought they left the firm to be independent. The outrage wasn't just about money. It was about arrogance. This was a country that had recently debated removing the monarchy altogether, that had grappled publicly with the question of post-colonial identity and indigenous reconciliation. And now, they were being asked, indirectly, to welcome a royal-adjacent couple with demands straight out of a James Bond villain playbook? It didn't land well. But instead of pulling back, recalibrating, or even issuing a clarification, the Sussexes reportedly continued as if the backlash didn't exist. Meghan's team drafted internal language for their own coverage describing the trip as highly anticipated and logistically challenging due to overwhelming interest. In reality, public approval was plummeting. One leaked poll conducted by an Australian media outlet showed that over 70% of respondents opposed the government offering any form of security support for the Sussexes' proposed visit. But the most dangerous misread wasn't in the logistics. It was in the silence. Because every high-powered name that didn't respond, or gave a quiet no, fed a growing perception that the Sussexes were now seen as a brand, not a cause. And when you're a brand asking for favors, you're not just evaluated on your mission, you're evaluated on your market value. In 2020, they had value, narrative value, disruption value, victim value. By 2026, the sheen was fading. Too many projects, not enough impact. Too many contradictions, not enough clarity. And so, the jet never materialized. The security partners pulled out. The healing tour looked more and more like a chaotic wish list scribbled by a couple trying to live both in the royal past and the celebrity future, while being rejected by both. Still, Meghan pressed on. She believed this was a re-entry moment, one insider said. Like Australia 2018, but with better hair and better lighting. But Harry? Harry was beginning to wobble. Sources say he was uncomfortable with the ask from the start, particularly the private jet component. His environmental work through Travelist, his speeches about climate change, all contradicted by the optics of flying across the southern hemisphere in a privately funded luxury aircraft. He wasn't thrilled, said one close observer. But Meghan was convinced the trip had to look polished, powerful, presidential. And that's where the problem lay. Because somewhere along the line, the idea of service, true service, got replaced by spectacle. And spectacle, when it isn't earned, collapses. The Australia trip, meant to be the Sussexes' narrative comeback, was already teetering before it began. Not because of royal interference, not because of tabloid manipulation, but because of their own inability to read the room. And when Oprah's polite but definitive rejection leaked through the industry grapevine, this journey is theirs to fund, it became a domino. If Oprah's out, then who's in? If they can't get Oprah to pick up, what makes them think Australia will? And that's when something truly unexpected happened. A well-placed source, likely someone within the entertainment industry, though no one has confirmed who, sent a copy of Meghan's original sponsorship pitch to a tabloid. Verbatim, the request for jet access, the exact line item for mobile security protocol, the vague but telling phrase, transport aligned with Trust Circle. The article dropped. Headlines exploded. And for the first time, Meghan's request wasn't a rumor. It was real. Screenshotted. Verified. Archived. No denials. No retractions. Just a quiet, embarrassed silence from the Sussexes camp. That silence said everything. And as the headlines continued rolling in, the Australia dream began to morph into something else. A cautionary tale. A case study in miscalculation. A preview of a fall. But the final blow wasn't the article, or even the embarrassment. It was the call that came in just 36 hours later, from Kensington Palace. And what Prince William said in that call would reframe the entire Australia scandal in a way no one expected and no one was prepared for. Why Australia? Why not Canada, where Meghan once lived? Why not South Africa, where the Sussexes once enjoyed a brief post-tour honeymoon of popularity? Why not a private, quiet trip somewhere off the radar? Why choose a continent tied so deeply to royal legacy when you've walked away from the crown? The answer is simple, and it's shocking. Because Australia wasn't chosen for charity. It wasn't chosen for sentiment. It wasn't even chosen for geography. Australia was chosen for the optics. Optics of power. Optics of forgiveness. Optics of reclamation. This wasn't about giving back. It was about taking back control, attention, image. And if you dig deep enough, it becomes clear this 2026 trip was never just a comeback. It was a coronation. Not one granted by a monarch, but one claimed in spite of one. Let's rewind to the glory days. In 2018, when Harry and Meghan landed in Australia on their first major overseas tour as Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the media exploded with praise. Modern, magnetic, monumental. Thousands braved rain in Sydney to wave Union Jacks and homemade signs. Children handed flowers. Meghan hugged teenage girls without hesitation. The couple visited farmers struggling with drought. Meghan gave speeches that felt unscripted, warm, real. The world, for a moment, believed the monarchy had entered a new age. But beneath the smiles and the satin gowns, something else was happening. Meghan's success, her unprecedented crowd pull, her emotional resonance, it sparked comparisons. And comparisons are dangerous within Windsor walls. One aide later confessed, "When you pull more people than your senior, eyebrows raise. When you do it repeatedly, whispers turn into strategy meetings." Harry and Meghan's Australia tour wasn't just a triumph. It was the beginning of a schism, the proof of concept that they could be bigger than the crown they wore. And that, insiders say, is exactly why Meghan has fixated on Australia ever since. Fast forward to 2026. Years out of the royal circle. Reputations battered. Public trust fractured. A string of failed media partnerships. A palace that no longer acknowledges them. A press that scrutinizes their every move. Netflix contracts winding down. Spotify deals evaporated. Invites to high society events noticeably less frequent. They needed something big. Something symbolic. Something that made people forget the lawsuits, the scandals, the ghosted godparents, the podcast promises that never materialized. And what better way than to return to the last place on earth where they felt adored? Australia was not just a destination. It was the final card they had to play. According to one Montecito PR strategist familiar with the inner discussions, Meghan reportedly referred to the trip as our recentering. A chance to close the loop. She believed the visuals of huge cheering crowds, of hugging First Nations leaders, of Harry in khakis crouching with barefoot children, would remind the world who they really were. 2026 was meant to reawaken 2018, the strategist said. It wasn't a tour. It was a reframe. But here's the twist. Unlike 2018, there would be no palace machinery to smooth the path. No Royal Australian Police to provide security. No embassy backchannels to coordinate protocol. No press secretaries to ensure coverage balance. This would have to be done independently, or appear to be done independently, because leaked emails now suggest the Sussexes had actually hoped the palace would support the tour, quietly, unofficially, to give it just enough legitimacy without officially endorsing it. It was the ultimate contradiction. They wanted the dignity of distance with the benefits of proximity, freedom from the institution with access to its influence. And when that didn't work, they reached for Plan B, Hollywood logistics with royal optics, private jet, personal security, celebrity-backed PR partnerships, all wrapped in the banner of humanitarianism. One source said Meghan's planning notes included phrases like, reclaim Commonwealth space, visual dominance over legacy royals, Australia as Act 2 of our journey. But to those inside the palace, and to many in the press, the real motive seemed crystal clear. This wasn't about healing the world. This was about outshining William and Kate on Commonwealth turf. Because guess what else is happening in 2026? A A likely official royal tour by Prince William and Princess Catherine, timed to mark milestones in King Charles's reign, including the anniversary of his accession and a diplomatic outreach strategy toward nations considering republic transitions. The Sussexes knew this. They didn't just plan around it. According to some accounts, they planned against it. They wanted to land in Sydney before William, said one UK political columnist. They wanted to dominate the narrative, to show they could draw a crowd without the crown. It was high-stakes media chess. And in chess, you don't just move to win. You move to threaten the next piece. The threat was clear. If the monarchy doesn't support us, we'll take the game to the very countries you're trying to court. And Australia, with its wavering monarchy sentiment, its political debates, and its history of rebellious affection for royals who shake the system, was the perfect storm. Or so they thought. But here's the emotional contradiction that makes this chapter tragic. Meghan and Harry genuinely believe they can heal. They believe they are misunderstood. They believe that re-entering the public stage will allow them to control the narrative again. But the world they left has moved on. The public doesn't forget. The Australian press doesn't forgive. And the monarchy, for all its faults, remembers. So when rumors of the trip leaked, the pushback came fast. Former officials warned the government not to fund anything related to the Sussexes. TV shows mocked their self-crowned tour. Politicians asked why a couple who ditched their duties were being allowed to roam the Commonwealth as if nothing happened. And yet, the Sussexes didn't stop. They doubled down. According to leaked PR briefs, Meghan's team began drafting new messaging to frame the trip as post-institutional, self-motivated, and an evolution of public service. They believed if they said it enough times, it would stick. But saying it isn't the same as proving it. And when their security demands, luxury expectations, and media access conditions became public knowledge, the gap between message and reality became unbridgeable. Even Harry, reportedly, started to feel uneasy. "This doesn't feel right anymore," he allegedly told a friend. But by then, it was too late. The story had grown legs. The public had drawn lines. And the palace was no longer silent. Because just days after the Australia pitch went public, and after Oprah's ghosting went viral, William made a call. Not to Harry, not to Meghan, but to someone far more powerful. Someone whose job wasn't to negotiate or to scold. Someone whose job was to protect the monarchy from confusion, chaos, and impersonation. What followed was a legal maneuver the Sussexes never anticipated. Because William wasn't just upset. He was preparing to act. And the mechanism he was about to trigger hadn't been used in over a century. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He didn't even raise his voice. But when Prince William read the leaked Australian documents, complete with Meghan and Harry's tour demands, jet preferences, and vague requests for security endorsements, his reaction was said to be colder than fury. It was surgical. And for those inside Kensington Palace, that made it all the more terrifying. Because when William is this quiet, it usually means something irreversible is coming. According to multiple palace sources, the Prince of Wales was in a closed briefing room when the news broke. A senior aide handed him a printed copy of a leaked itinerary sent anonymously to a member of the Foreign Office. At first glance, it looked like just another Sussex vanity stunt. But as William read deeper, line by line, the color reportedly drained from his face. Unofficial Commonwealth Outreach Tour. Charitable engagement framework with Australia's Indigenous communities. Media coordination pending approval from select production partners. Security provision to be independently managed or supported via royal-adjacent frameworks where possible. Royal-adjacent frameworks? That was the line. The phrase that made William, the future king, lean back in his chair and go completely still. According to one palace staffer, he sat there for a full minute. No blinking, no speaking, just scanning the page over and over. And then, he put the paper down, leaned forward, and said something no one in that room would forget. "They're pretending to be us." It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't bitterness. It was institutional betrayal. Because William understood what few people outside the palace grasp. The monarchy is held together not by blood, but by clarity. Clear roles, clear protocol, clear allegiance. You're either inside, with obligations and limitations, or you're out. And what Harry and Meghan were doing in Australia was neither. They weren't on a royal tour, but they were marketing it like one. They weren't representing the crown, but they were asking for royal treatment. They weren't serving the institution, but they were dressing the part. And for William, a man being groomed since childhood to one day embody that institution, this wasn't just reckless. It was dangerous. And that's when he exploded, not publicly, not to the press, but within the marble walls of Kensington Palace. A fury of whispers shot through the hallways. He called an emergency meeting with his senior advisors. He had a secure call with the king's private secretary. And, most surprisingly of all, he looped in legal counsel. Enough is enough, he reportedly said. They're not just making noise anymore. They're staging fiction and dressing it in royal costume. But here's where it gets dramatic. Because William didn't just want to issue a statement. He didn't want to clarify or distance the palace from the Sussex tour that had already been done in subtle, dignified ways through royal correspondence. This time, he wanted teeth. So he asked his legal team one very specific question. What's the protocol if someone impersonates royal duties on foreign soil? It was a strange ask, one that made the lawyer pause. That protocol hadn't been reviewed in nearly 100 years. Since the Edward VIII crisis, when fears about private influence abroad became a ticking time bomb. But the document existed, and William had read it years ago. He never thought he'd have to use it. Until now. By the end of the day, a memo was drafted. It was concise, tactful, but unmistakably forceful. The title? Royal Distinction and Unauthorized Representation, Protection Clause 17b. The essence. It empowered the palace to notify foreign governments of individuals misrepresenting themselves as working royals and request that no state-level assistance, security coordination, or ceremonial privileges be extended. It was a tool of quiet but lethal diplomacy, and it had just been triggered. William didn't send it himself. He had his team do it. But the instruction was clear. Pass it along to the Australian government and make it known that this was not a royal-sanctioned tour. Not now. Not ever. One insider close to the situation described it as the firmest move yet to sever ties. And when the directive reached Canberra, things started moving fast. But let's rewind. Because while this was unfolding in Kensington, other parts of the palace were starting to feel the aftershocks. William's frustration, usually well concealed, was leaking. Staff began whispering about the room. That's what they called it. The room where William's demeanor had shifted from future monarch to protective gatekeeper of royal legacy. And slowly, aides began sharing snippets of what had been said. He's never been this angry, said one. He used the word usurping, said another. He thinks this could damage his Commonwealth strategy, said a third. Even Charles, notoriously reluctant to take sides when it comes to his sons, was said to be quietly shaken by William's move. He knew this could change the family forever, said a former courtier. But he also knew William wasn't wrong. Because let's not forget, 2026 isn't just any year for the monarchy. It marks the 75th anniversary of Queen Elizabeth's coronation. There are legacy tours planned, speeches written, symbolic acts of unity being orchestrated across multiple Commonwealth nations. The last thing the firm needs is a rogue couple with a media crew hijacking the headlines. And William? He sees the whole board. He's not just fighting a personal grudge. He's defending the chess game, the structure, the lines that hold power in place. So when he realized Harry and Meghan were trying to step back into the royal spotlight, without any of the constraints that come with it, his patience shattered. And here's the emotional kicker. Despite it all, despite the betrayal, the exile, the lawsuits, the tell-alls, a small part of William still believed that his brother wouldn't go this far. That even if they clashed, Harry would understand that impersonating royal roles overseas would cross a line. That line just got crossed. And once crossed, there's no going back. Because that memo, Protection Clause 17b, wasn't just a polite tap on the shoulder. It was a signal. To the palace. To the press. To Australia. And most of all, to Harry. A signal that said, we see what you're doing. And we will not allow it. But the truly chilling moment came just after the memo was sent. One of William's most senior advisors reportedly asked him, what if they ignore it? William didn't blink. He simply replied, then we escalate. And that's the part no one was ready for. Because escalation, from a future king, means one thing, full-on reputational isolation. No palace support. No protection from headlines. No diplomacy. No rescue net. Only silence. And silence, from Buckingham Palace, is louder than any press release. But even as William prepared for war, the Sussexes were still planning photo ops, still organizing staged walkabouts, still briefing their small team of loyal staff, still chasing security vendors, still whispering to select media outlets about a massive comeback moment. They didn't know. Not yet. They didn't know that William had just burned the bridge completely, and that Australia's government, now caught in the middle, was already reevaluating whether to provide any police support at all. But the moment that changed everything wasn't the memo. It was the press leak. Because just 48 hours after the memo was sent, a tabloid got hold of it, and the headlines the next morning would explode across front pages in Australia, the UK, and the US, with 6 words that would echo through royal history. William moves to block Sussex tour. The headline hit like a thunderclap. William moves to block Sussex tour. 6 words. Just 6. But they shattered what little momentum Harry and Meghan had left. Within minutes, the UK tabloids ran wild with interpretations. The Daily Mail blasted it across their homepage like a national emergency. The Sun threw in words like rogue, defiant, and self-crowned. Even The Guardian, normally more reserved, led with the stark implication: the palace is done pretending this is fine. But the real chaos started 10,000 miles away, in Australia. It was breakfast television gold. Channel 9's Today show had barely rolled into its second hour when news alerts began buzzing across the studio floor. At first, producers assumed it was just another recycled Sussex story. But then they read the subhead: Royal Protocol Clause activated. Prince William formally requests Australia deny Sussex security and ceremonial access. Cue panic. Cue exhilaration. Cue anchors scrambling for earpieces and flipping to the live update monitor. And then, cue the drag. With caffeine-fueled glee, co-host Carl Stefanovic looked straight into the camera and said, "Well, it looks like Prince William's not just the heir, he's the enforcer." The laughter that followed wasn't kind. It wasn't warm. It wasn't even particularly subtle. It was mockery. Sharp, pointed, unmistakable mockery. And the segment that came next? Let's just say it will be played in media studies classes for years. Because Channel 9 didn't just report the memo. They dissected it. They weaponized it. They memed it in real time. A split screen popped up. On one side, a glamour shot of Meghan waving from a Range Rover during their 2018 tour. On the other side, a screenshot of the leaked line item from their 2026 pitch, requesting a security perimeter extending no less than 50 meters in all directions at all times. The anchor squinted. 50 meters? What is she, radioactive? Laughter again. Then came a graphic titled, Royal vs. FAUXYL. A tongue-in-cheek side-by-side comparing a typical official royal tour with the Sussex proposal. Official royal tour, state dinners, diplomatic receptions, protocol officers, clearances. Sussex tour proposal, sponsored lunches, branded walkabouts, private jet clauses, docuseries camera permissions. Even the studio audience winced. But it didn't stop there. Because Channel 9 then aired a 3-minute satirical skit. A Meghan and Harry impersonator duo boarding a fake plane titled Duchess Air, while requesting swan-flown mineral water, vintage camera filters, and security escorts with Oscar-nominated jawlines. It was brutal. It was viral. And it was exactly what Meghan feared. See, here's the thing about media spin. Once you lose control of the framing, even the truth can't save you. And in this moment, this very public, very humiliating moment, the Sussexes lost the framing completely. One aide from the Australian Foreign Office reportedly texted a colleague mid-broadcast, "This is getting unmanageable. Public's turning fast." Meanwhile, Meghan's team scrambled to put together a response. Damage control mode was activated in Montecito. Calls were made to editors at Harper's Bazaar, People magazine, even Oprah's Circle, though, as we know by now, Oprah's phone wasn't picking up anymore. Back in the UK, palace insiders remained eerily quiet. No denials. No clarifications. Why? Because they didn't need to say anything. The memo was doing the work for them, and the media was running with it full speed. What made this moment so defining wasn't just the embarrassment. It was the realization, on Harry and Meghan's part, that their media armor had completely crumbled. No more defenders leaping to their rescue. No more high-profile allies publicly defending their intentions. No more reframing. Just cold, hard optics. And Australia? Australia was not playing. One senator took to Twitter, now X, that afternoon and wrote, "The British royals serve here at the request of the Commonwealth. The ex-royals? They serve no one." That tweet was reposted nearly 4 million times. Meghan, according to one well-placed insider, was distraught. She had envisioned a triumphant return to the stage where she once dazzled. Instead, she was becoming a punchline in morning comedy segments. But Harry? Harry was silent. Sources say he sat in the sunroom of their Montecito estate, watching the coverage unfold with a blank expression. No rage, no shouting, just stillness. Because deep down, he knew something she didn't want to admit. This wasn't sabotage. This was consequence. A consequence of 1,000 cuts, from the Oprah interview, to the Netflix series, to the repeated contradictions between their stated values and their very public behavior. You can't preach about climate justice and request a fully staffed private jet. You can't attack the institution and then dress up your PR trip in royal trappings. You can't beg for freedom and then ask your billionaire friends to bankroll the perks you just gave up. But Meghan had been betting on something else entirely. Emotion. She believed that if she positioned the trip as a mission of empathy, of healing and reconnection, the criticism would be drowned out. She was wrong. Because the media had changed. The audience had changed. Even their base was splintering. Online, Sussex supporters were scrambling to spin the leak. Some called it a royalist trap. Others blamed the British tabloids. But their narratives couldn't keep up with the sheer volume of ridicule. You can't gaslight a public who's laughing in your face. And yet, Meghan kept pushing. A pre-scheduled media blast, titled Sussex 2026, Legacy of Service, was still distributed via their website and social channels. It included vague language about honoring partnerships, global visibility, and reaffirming connection. But no mention of the memo. No mention of William. No mention of the growing backlash. The comments? Brutal. What legacy? You're tourists. Are we supposed to pay for this cosplay? No one invited you. The truth? Meghan wasn't just facing a press crisis. She was facing a legitimacy crisis. And legitimacy, once lost, is nearly impossible to win back. But still they pressed on. Their team reached out to local Australian charities hoping to secure joint appearances. Some responded with cautious interest. Others declined. One response, reportedly from a high-profile Indigenous rights group, said, "We are not comfortable participating in a tour the palace has formally disavowed." That line, leaked, posted, shared, analyzed, destroyed whatever was left of the PR plan. Meanwhile, back in London, William was calm. Sources say he went for a run that morning, ignoring the frenzy. When asked about the headlines, he reportedly said, "I don't celebrate family embarrassment, but I won't protect something that threatens the institution either." Cold, measured, ruthless. But here's where the story takes a twist. Because while the media was still feasting on the memo, another call was happening. This time from a member of Meghan's own team. To Netflix. The purpose? To ask if the Australia tour docuseries was still viable, or if the project should be quietly shelved before cameras even rolled. The response? "We'll get back to you." In Hollywood, that's code for, probably not. And suddenly, the biggest comeback tour in modern royal media was starting to look like a quiet retreat waiting to happen. But Meghan wasn't done yet. She had one more card to play. One final appearance meant to shift the narrative, rehumanize the message, and remind people of the emotional pull she once wielded so effortlessly. A live video appearance, pre-taped, but styled to look raw and unrehearsed, set to drop via Vogue Australia. Her message? We don't need titles to serve. We don't need crowns to care. But just before it aired, something leaked again. An audio recording. A voicemail. And not just any voicemail. Oprah's. Yes. That voicemail. And the 32-second message inside would land like a bombshell, not just on Meghan's Australia dreams, but on everything she had tried to rebuild since Montecito. Because it wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was definitive. And what Oprah said in that voicemail was a line Meghan would never escape. In Hollywood, silence is never really silent. It's coded, strategic, calculated. And when it comes from someone as powerful as Oprah Winfrey, it echoes louder than any tabloid headline or viral tweet. So when Meghan Markle's team received that now infamous 32-second voicemail, polite, measured, devastating, the message wasn't just clear. It was final. This journey is yours to own and yours to finance. Oprah had spoken, not to the public, not to the press, but to Meghan herself. And what she said, or more importantly what she didn't say, triggered a domino effect across the very industry Meghan and Harry had come to rely on. Because Hollywood may sell dreams, but it runs on reputation. And now, the Sussex reputation was slipping. Fast. Let's be clear. Hollywood didn't turn on Meghan and Harry overnight. It wasn't a single scandal. It wasn't just the Australia trip, or the royal estrangement, or even the Spotify embarrassment. It was all of it. Cumulative fatigue. Quiet frustration. Dwindling deliverables. But Oprah walking away? That was the industry's signal that it was okay to do the same. Within 48 hours of the voicemail leak, the whispers began. It started with agencies. A well-known talent manager, someone who once pitched Meghan for keynote conferences and branded wellness panels, allegedly paused all future outreach until we see how this plays out. Netflix, already growing cautious, reportedly shifted the Sussexes' pending documentary concept from greenlight to development purgatory. Spotify? Long gone. Amazon? Not returning calls. And then came the producers. Jason Orley, who had once been attached to a rumored Sussex docudrama under Amazon MGM, allegedly asked to be removed from internal pitch decks. He didn't want his name next to what he reportedly called a melodrama in slow motion. And perhaps most tellingly of all, A-list celebrities stopped replying. Gone were the days when Meghan could text a stylist and get a sample rack by sunset. Gone were the friendly quotes from Serena Williams, Priyanka Chopra, or even Chrissy Teigen. Now, there was distance. Tactful. Subtle. Ice-cold. The Hollywood term for it is ghost fading. It's not a hard block. It's not a scandal-fueled cancellation. It's the polite removal of relevance. The slow fade into soft exile. And for a woman who built her post-palace brand on proximity to Hollywood power, it was catastrophic. Behind the scenes, her team tried to hold the line. They reached out to Vogue Latin America for a potential cover. No reply. They pitched a Meghan X Mindfulness capsule series to HBO Max, politely declined. They even reached out to Reese Witherspoon's production company to gauge interest in a joint female empowerment through storytelling docuseries. No traction. The Meghan magic, once a media goldmine, was now considered a risky investment. She's overexposed, one Hollywood development exec said bluntly. There's nothing left to reveal, and no one left to believe it. But it wasn't just about Meghan. Harry was being pulled down with her. Travelist, his once promising sustainable tourism initiative, had seen a funding dip. Corporate sponsors were growing nervous about the optics. Invictus? Still respected, but distancing itself quietly from Sussex branding. There were talks, unconfirmed but rumored, that future events would be jointly hosted with other veterans' foundations to avoid distraction. And in Montecito, tensions rose. According to one insider, Harry had begun retreating emotionally. Less engagement with planning meetings. Less enthusiasm about the Australia itinerary. Fewer public smiles during local events. He just shut down, the source said. It's like he was realizing, in real time, that the world he gave everything up for didn't want him anymore. And Meghan? She kept pushing. Resilience is her superpower. That much is true. But resilience without self-awareness can look a lot like delusion. Even as the calls stopped. Even as Netflix hesitated. Even as Vogue ghosted. Even as Oprah's voicemail trended for 72 straight hours. She still insisted the Australia trip would be a turning point. She believed that a single good photo op, one walkabout, one emotionally charged speech, could change the tide. And maybe, in another reality, it could have. But not this one. Because Hollywood, like the Crown, has rules. Unspoken ones. Rule number 1, never become a punchline. Rule number 2, never look like you're trying too hard. Rule number 3, never ask for favors once your stock has dropped, unless you can offer something 10 times better in return. And the Sussexes? They had nothing to trade. That's when the cancellations began. Events they were meant to headline mysteriously rescheduled. interviews pulled from editorial calendars, brand partnerships delayed due to timing. And then came the worst moment of all. A board member from one of the charities Meghan was scheduled to visit in Sydney during the tour reportedly called her team and asked to remove the visit from their press release. Why? Too much noise. Not enough substance. That sentence, relayed back through Montecito circles, hit hard. Because it summarized everything. The Sussexes weren't seen as evil. They weren't seen as villains. They were seen as noise. Uncontrollable, unpredictable, chaotic noise. And Hollywood doesn't do chaos unless it sells. And right now, it didn't. Meanwhile, William's strategy, remain calm, act once, and then disappear, was working. No public statement. No interviews. No retaliation. Just silence. And in that silence, the industry made its move. But there was one person who hadn't spoken. Tyler Perry, the man who once gave them shelter. The man who opened his compound when the palace closed its gates. The man who stood up for them when the world was cruel. And now, he was nowhere to be found. Calls unreturned. Emails ignored. Invitations unanswered. And just when Meghan's team began crafting a new statement, something heartfelt, maybe a little teary-eyed, a soft relaunch before Australia, a Hollywood journalist published a story. Not an exposé, not a smear, just an analysis. Headline: From Oprah to Obsolete. Why Hollywood's done with the Sussex narrative. It was brutal, detailed, ruthless, and it ended with a quote, allegedly from a major studio exec who remained anonymous. Everyone has a second act in Hollywood, but not everyone gets a third. And Meghan? She was already on her fourth. Still, she didn't cry. Not publicly. Instead, she looked at her team and asked a question that stunned everyone. Should we invite the cameras anyway? Meaning, despite the backlash, despite the memo, despite the cancellations, should they still film the Australia trip for release? The room was silent. No one answered. Because deep down, they all knew something was coming. Something that would make even filming impossible. Because while Meghan still believed this was her moment to reclaim the spotlight, another battle was brewing. Not in Montecito, not in Sydney, but in Parliament. And what was about to be proposed in the halls of British government wouldn't just end the tour. It would redefine what the Sussexes could ever do in the Commonwealth again.